my channel. Today we're going to be doing a first grade do-over. If I could start homeschool all over again and go back to first grade and tell myself what to do, this is what I would do. So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. So if you enjoy this type of content and other homeschool and lifestyle content, please remember to subscribe and let's get into it. All right, so with this do-over, I want to just mention before we start that if you have not done this, you are in no way going to fail at homeschool, or you don't need to start over or switch everything right now. I'm just telling you what I think would have been best for our family. And it's really hard. I wish that I had my future self when we started homeschool to tell me this is going to work best for you guys, but I didn't. And so I'm hoping that people out there that either are starting homeschool or maybe have some kids that are around first grade or in kindergarten now and going into first grade, that maybe this will give them some ideas if they're struggling, if you're not sure what to do or where to start. This is what I think would have worked best for us then. It's working well for us now. And as my kids get older, so I have 6 kids, 4 of them are a little bit older grades, like 7th through 2nd, I think. And then 2 of them are still really little. So I have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so this is what, there's a 5-year gap in between the oldest 4 and the bottom 2. And so with my 2-year-old, these are the things that I would have wanted to know as he was getting older. And I do have a kindergarten do-over video as well. If I remember, I'll link it down below. And so you can check that one out with some things I think would have worked well for us in kindergarten. But today we're gonna talk about first grade, which I feel like kind of just covers all the grades because it would be super repetitive to get on here and tell you all the grades. But from first grade on, I feel like those grades are somewhat similar in the way that we do things and the way things are formatted. And so I feel like these things still apply a lot to those later grades. All right, I have my notes down here, so if I'm glancing down, it's because I don't want to forget to tell you anything. So the first thing would have been to start with the same curriculum from the beginning. Again, this is in an ideal world that this is how I would have done it. And sometimes kids need changes in curriculum. I'm not going with all those types of things. I know there's lots of caveats with how this could work. But in an ideal world, if I could have seen where we would be now, this is what I would have done. I would have started with the same curriculum from the beginning. And I would have done more research before just jumping into a curriculum. You know, I feel like, so we started homeschooling when my oldest was in kindergarten, and it was kind of an abrupt thing, and all of a sudden we were homeschooling. And so then even once we got to first grade for him and for my other kids, I still was searching around for curriculums. I was like, oh, I don't really like this one and I don't like this one. And so not only would we spend lots of money trying out different curriculums, but I didn't like most of them. I was having a really hard time finding something that worked well for me as a parent, that, you know, as far as timing and like having to be labor intensive when I'm trying to homeschool lots of kids, but also that worked well for my kids, not just in first grade, but long term, which I can see now because I can see what has worked well for them in over several years. So, you know, it's been 8 years now. And so I can see that a little bit better. So I wish I could have started with the same curriculum from the beginning, and that I also would have been able to do more research. And I was doing the best I could with what I had, but the curriculum I would have started with from the beginning if I had known about it was The Good and the Beautiful. And I know some people were mentioning it, and I got advice from some of the people we lived around in California, and we used some of the curriculum they had recommended, but a lot of the curriculum was just a little bit here, a little bit there. Oh, if you want to do spelling, pull it from this curriculum. If you want to do grammar, pull it from this curriculum. And then math, pull it from this curriculum. And I feel like over time, my kids didn't do as well with that because there wasn't any continuity in what they were learning. You know, it was like, oh, did you even learn this in this other curriculum we tried and we didn't like? I don't even know. So if I could have just started at the beginning with The Good and the Beautiful, I feel like that would have been ideal. And I've seen with some of my kids, especially my 4th grader right now, he basically did start with The Good and the Beautiful from first grade on. I don't remember if he did any of it in kindergarten, but he did first grade on. And his understanding, he is already a very bright child. So again, personality plays into this, but his understanding of grammar and language arts and punctuation is so much better than my older kids. They're, I feel like, constantly playing catch up because they just didn't learn those things, or I didn't know if they were learning those things because we were trying to find curriculums that worked well for us, and we had a really hard time doing it. And so I feel like if they had all been able to start from like ground zero, first grade basically, on with the Good and the Beautiful's language arts, they would all be in a much better space than they are now, and they're doing fine, and they are catching up, you know, and they're learning the things, but there's a lot of things, there's gaps just because they didn't have it from the beginning, and so trying to help them understand it now, it's a little bit difficult. So that would be my number one thing. If I could do a do-over, that's what I would do. The next thing I would have done is to spend more time doing hands-on things. This applies a lot more to the younger grades than it does some of the older ones. But I feel like I was so consumed with getting through all of our book work or adding more book work. It's like, oh, this is going too fast. So maybe that means we need something else, you know, instead of just basic language arts and math, we need to add all these other things. And I feel like, especially for those younger grades, just like giving them sensory bins or playing games with them or going outside more. This is a little difficult, obviously, if you have older kids, because you might have to be helping them. You know, in my head, I'm envisioning it as it would have been my oldest child. And so if we had started it that way, it would have been him going through all these things that way. But if you already have older kids, like I will pretty soon once my 2-year-old, you know, moves into kindergarten and first grade and we start this whole thing over again, then it's a little bit trickier because, you know, they might be independent as older kids, but they also might need some help. You still might be doing group work together. So you can still set sensory bins out, maybe some activities that the kids can do while you help your older children, but then maybe try to spend some time doing stuff with them. I am in no way good at this, okay? I am just, no. I'm telling you this because this is what I wish I had done. I wish I wasn't so concerned with all the curriculum and just more of letting kids play because they're just in first grade, so what's the big deal? Something else I would not have done if I could do it over is to buy individual desks for my kids when they were super young. So when we moved into this house, we were in our second year of homeschool. We moved from California. In California, we didn't really have much homeschool space. It was mostly the kitchen table or sitting on the couch. And we had a little table that my son could sit at and do work and stuff like that. And then when we moved here, I was like, we're gonna get desks. And I bought IKEA desks, so they weren't crazy expensive, but still, it was an investment. And set them all up in this room. If you've seen some of my first like homeschool room tour videos, you will have seen what it used to look like. And after like a year, I really didn't like it. One big reason was their desks just become clutter bombs. Even though I had them clean them very frequently, this is my space now, so it just becomes a mess constantly. And I did not like that. And also, it was just a little bit harder when they're all over the place, especially when they're so young, to do stuff with them. Or if we were doing an activity and they had to all go back to their desks, you know, it was just more complicated. I feel like there's a time and place for having individual desks. And maybe as I have my older kids separated kind of from my two littlest kids, once they get into school, maybe we will have to figure out a situation where they do have desks and they have a separate space where it's quiet, they can function and they can sit there. But right now, our best space for learning is usually around the table, either this table or the kitchen table. I sit out there a lot if my baby's having snacks in her high chair, and I'll sit there with my second grader and help her. Is she in second grade? Some of my kids are ahead in subjects and some are a little bit behind. So I'm like, it's hard for me to keep straight what actually grades they're in because I'm just like, I don't know. And there's so many of them. But I will sit there and help her with her schoolwork while my baby's having a snack, and just working at the table together is the easiest thing for us right now. So again, maybe as they get older, it might facilitate needing separate desks and stuff like that. And we still have separate drawers for them that came from the desk. Those were also from IKEA. And so they keep all their schoolwork in those, which is very, very nice to keep all their stuff separate and organized. But I don't feel like it was necessary to get them all separate desks and organize the room in that way. It just wasn't very useful for our family. And I can again see that now looking back on it. And even after a few years of living it that way, I realized that it just didn't work best for us. Something else I would have done better is to read more books and to read chapter books. Even in first grade, my daughter is, like I said, second grade now, but last year she loved listening to me read books. So I'm not saying that, it's not above their head. Obviously you can be careful about what you're choosing to read or whatever, but she was just as engaged as everybody else when she was in first grade. And so reading more complex stories that are still developmentally appropriate, I feel like is very good. And we read some. I'm not one of those moms that's really good at sitting down, playing with kids, reading stories to them and being like, okay, let's do this next. I'm not. It's just not me. I have to really work at being that kind of a mom. I'm very much like, this is what we're doing now. I'm good at establishing routines, helping with chores, teaching those kinds of things is something that I'm very, very good at. But playing with children is not something I'm really good at. And so I wish I had read more to my kids, and now I enjoy reading. I pick stories too that are interesting for me so that I'm not bored. And usually if they're interesting for me, that means that they will like them too. And so we've read a lot more books in the last couple years than we really did the whole first 6 years, 5 years that we homeschooled. And they would read for their schoolwork, but I wasn't doing a lot of read alouds with them. So read more, especially at those young ages. I feel like that's one of the best things that you could do for your kids is just to read with them or read to them. The last thing that I would tell myself and do differently is to say that it's not that big of a deal. It's just first grade. I think sometimes, especially in our society today in America, it's very much like kids need to be reading in kindergarten or they're already so far behind. Where in reality, kids don't really need to be reading in kindergarten or first grade, maybe not even second grade, and it's totally fine. Okay, there's just little things like that where I feel like I let society dictate how I was teaching my kids. And it's hard when you're starting homeschool to know what's best and to know where your kids are supposed to be and to let go of all those social norms that you were raised with, going to public school and then being a mom and having a few kids go to school for a short amount of time. It's hard to get rid of all that kind of stuff that's in your head. And so I feel like that was difficult at the beginning. So my second child is a girl. She's 11 now, but she struggled with reading. And her sister, who is 7, is going through the very similar struggles. But this older daughter, she was eloquently talking before she was 2 years old. My younger daughter, the middle daughter, because I have 3, the middle daughter was not. You can understand her when she was little. And now she's struggling with reading as well. So, they're different that way. But this older daughter, since she could just talk so well and express her thoughts so clearly, she still does. I'm like, you should be a writer because of the way she can express her thoughts. She struggled so much with reading, and I would have told myself to not be so harsh on her because I feel like even now I have to remind myself to not be so harsh on the younger daughter because it's just hard. It's hard for me to remember that. I don't know, you just get so in, again, this mindset that you might have grown up with or that everybody else or friends are already reading and they're reading well or they're reading higher level books. And then you have to tell yourself, it's okay if my child is not like that. And it's just first grade, okay? It's just first grade. Everything's okay. And it's okay if you're not doing all the things. Because again, it's just first grade. You don't need to be a part of all the co-ops. You don't need to have huge group work, all the extra subjects. You don't need to be doing geography and science and history and everything. It's okay. It's just first grade, okay? So I think giving ourselves some grace there and reminding ourselves that they're still just little kids. They just want to play and they want to spend some time with you. and they want, you know, to get dirty, which I don't love, but all those things, like they just want to be a kid. So let them be a kid, despite what society is telling you or what you grew up doing. Just let them be a kid, and remember, it's just first grade. All right, so that is my first grade do-over. If I could go back, those are the things that I would tell myself or the things that I would change. And again, they might not have been ideal things either. Okay, these could have messed us up in different ways, who knows? But hopefully these thoughts or insights are helpful to you if you are starting homeschool, if you're going into first grade with some of your kids, whatever it may be. Hopefully this gave you some different ideas or things that you could check out or think about. And put down in the comments below some things that are helpful for you. If you just started, what has been helpful, maybe what questions you have, or if you've been homeschooling for a long time, what are some things you would do over? If you could go back and change them, what would you change? And remember to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.